Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. Thank you all for coming. It's lovely to be here. Thank you to David and everybody at TULCA. And thank you to Gavin as well for having me here. So I thought what I'd do today is kind of take you through the last maybe 10 years of various projects that I've been working on. Not all of them, but the kind of ones that are relevant, I suppose, to the work that's here at TULCA, which you may or may not have seen. I'm going to show a lot of clips of various different types of work. And I think what occurred to me when I was putting it all together is that there's a kind of a consistent strain in the way I approached making most of these films and installations. And I kind of have been developing a methodology over those years, and I'm still kind of working on that in the projects that I'm working on now. So a lot of the work I'll talk about will be the work I've been doing with Askeaton Contemporary Arts, of whom Michele is the director, one of the directors, who's the curator of TULCA, Michele Horrigan. So I've been working with Michele and Sean at Askeaton for, gosh, maybe 12 years altogether now, or something like that, in various forms and various projects. But the work that came, that's at TULCA, those two films, Shawnee Barron, Only in Askeaton, and Lily of the Valley, came out of a project that we started in 2020, and we've since made 7 short films together, and we're working on another one next year. And so this is a kind of a collaboration that's kind of been very interesting, and I'll explain why, and fruitful in various ways as well. I'm just going to, first of all, talk about some installation work I did starting in about 2014, 2015. So these were kind of most of them based around residencies that I did around that time. So the one on the top left there is an image from a residency I did at the Workhouse Studios in Callan, County Kilkenny. And I was there for, I think, 3 weeks or something like that. I don't know if anybody here has done an artist residency, but you kind of land there and you have this moment where you think, oh gosh, like what am I going to do for 3 weeks or for 3 months or whatever it is. And so my way to kind of approach finding out about that place was to go walking. So I walked all over the little country roads around Callan and around the town, and I went talking to anybody I could over the period of 3 weeks. And I came up with this video that was about a historical situation that had happened there in the 1800s. What you see up on the plinth next to the video is the tongue of a church bell. So there was a schism in between 2 churches in Callan, the town of Callan, in the 1840s. And long story short, some guys broke into the church, took the tongue out of the bell, and it disappeared. So as part of my kind of research, my walking and talking to people, we actually rediscovered the tongue of that bell, and we put it on display, and it's now in the workhouse ever since. That was kind of fun. So the video was just telling the story then of that in the kind of most idiosyncratic way I could think. Some other works. This was an exhibition I did in Sheemsatira in Tralee, and that was about a faction fight that had happened near there, again in the 1800s and the 1830s, I think, at that time. So I kind of I was interested in histories and how they're represented and how they change, how that narrative kind of changes over time at that time. And that's part of the reason I started working with Sean and Michele at Askeaton as well, because our interests were kind of very much aligned in that way. So, so that was again a video installation. You can't see it, but inside that circular enclosure is I had an accordion that was breathing throughout the duration of the exhibition for a few weeks, and that actually was on show here at the 126 Gallery one summer as well for a little while. Another installation I did there, I was in St. Mary's Abbey in Dublin, a beautiful old 12th century abbey with a really interesting statue, wooden statue that's in the corner. Again, I spent a lot of time kind of just being there and talking to people who knew about the place and getting to know what it was about and trying to figure out what kind of weird history has brought us to this place that's now kind of more or less buried underneath the inner city of Dublin. I'm going to fly through these because it's just an introduction to the type of work that I kind of have ended up doing. Again, the one on the top right here is from an installation I did at the Riverbank Arts Centre in Kildare in Newbridge in 2018, I'll say. And that was an interesting one. So they gave me a kind of a brief, I suppose, to do a project, something around the motorway, the M7 motorway that passes close enough to there. And I was kind of trying to figure out how am I going to do this, you know? So what do I do about the motorway? So they were talking about maybe looking at the public artwork that was situated along the motorway and this type of thing. What I ended up doing is I walked the length of the motorway from where it begins at Naas in Kildare to just outside Limerick, not on the motorway, but kind of near it and alongside it. It took me about a week. It was a mistake because it was it was really awful. But I really got to know. I got a different sense for the motorway. That was my original intent, was to kind of see what it would be like to walk something that takes 2 hours or 3 hours to travel in a car, and how you kind of perceive the countryside a little bit differently. It was a small enough project for me, besides the blisters and everything and the sore feet, but it changed actually the way I approach artwork, I think. What I realized doing that project is the longer you kind of spend with something, the more of a sense, the more it kind of soaks into you. And that kind of actually changed my attitude towards filmmaking and art making since then. And it's something that I kind of really like to do. So both of these other images that you see were born out of residencies. This one in Estonia, in Tartu in Estonia, and that one in the Netherlands in Haarlem. And again, these are, I would spend a long time in a place or with people before I even thought about making anything. And that's a method that has kind of stuck with me. And as you'll see, it kind of has bled into all of the work I do. So then I took that kind of idea to the extreme, I guess. I did my PhD project with University College Cork starting in 2018, around then. So my idea was to spend 3 years with one project, with one idea. So I approached a GAA club in Clonakilty in County Cork and offered to spend 3 years filming them and hanging out with them and being involved in the community. And they said no originally, and I kind of talked them around to it, and eventually they kind of thought it might be beneficial to them in certain ways too, which was kind of interesting to me. So I did that. So what I did is I would kind of come along to anything I could. It's a big enough GAA club, but I spent all that time just kind of turning up, filming whatever. There was like bingo or football matches, Gaelic, other things, whatever. There was a funeral. Actually, I'm going to show you a short clip. After the 3 years, I put it together as an installation in the West Cork Arts Centre in Skibbereen. My kind of way of interacting with the community became part of the artwork. So as you'll see in that 2-channel installation on the top right, I would make cuts of this film making that I did, of this kind of observational filmmaking, and I would bring it and I would show it to members of the community in the local cinema, or sometimes we did it in the club itself or other places. And I would film them watching it and having a discussion about it, and then I'd go back out and do more filming. And this kind of went on and on for 3 years. It was an experiment, I suppose, as PhD work often should be. And yeah, so it ended up as that installation. I'm going to show you a short clip. I think I have it here. I didn't open it, so I'll just have to do that. The parish. So this is a short clip of, I'll show you 3 minutes of this, of the installation as it happened in the Arts Centre.
I'm in the referee! Yes!
Hello. I'm very good. Sean? I'm very good. Oh, sorry, cheese.
Okay, I'll stop it there. So part of my experiment was trying to see, like, what happens if you spend a lot of time with something, like a long time. That was 3 years, which you don't often get to do. And like, it changed everything. They were calling me out to do favors for them and kind of volunteer for the club, but also they were genuinely trusted me because they knew my intentions were good. It took a long time to build that trust, I suppose. And it got me thinking about the ethics of filmmaking, of making documentaries especially, whereas sometimes, you know, a conventional news documentary or something like that kind of helicopters in, does the work, meets the people, interviews and so on, and then kind of goes off and does its thing, its editing and so on. I wanted to see, and it's been done in various ways in the past also, but perhaps not exactly in this way. I wanted to see what it was like if I didn't do that, if I kind of just stayed within the community, what it was like kind of looking from inside the community and filming effectively. I'm still getting phone calls from them actually to film things, but I'm not down there anymore, which is kind of not that surprising. So that ended up, like I said, as an installation. We did kind of meetings and talks and various things at the installation as well, which was really interesting. Around that time as well, I started working on kind of more what you might call conventional documentary style films. This one is from just before COVID, early 2019. Was a film that I actually made and it was supposed to be shown at TULCA, I think the following year, or in 2020 maybe, and it wasn't because of COVID. So this is called Smoke Rises Above Exotic Trees, and it's about this woman, Shona Jones, who lives out in kind of remote West Cork. She's from Wales originally, and she's in her 60s. So she lives in this area that's been kind of heavily forested with forest plantations, Sitka spruce commercial plantations. A lot of us might know about this issue, I suppose, that a lot of kind of unused land in Ireland has been planted with these, and it causes all sorts of problems with the soil, and it was at one time considered as a positive forestry movement, but maybe it's not, and so on. So that debate is still going on. In any case, Sinead took it upon herself to go into the spruce plantations near her house with a chainsaw and cut down Sitka spruce, and she replanted with native Irish trees, oak, elder, ash, really interesting little trees. So she was trying to kind of re-establish the native forest, but the issue was this was a Cuilcha state plantation. She was arrested, and she was in court at the time we filmed her for criminal damage, which didn't stop her, by the way. She's still doing it, as far as I know. So Sinead was a really fascinating character. I got to know her through my wife, and we spent a lot of time kind of going out to her house and chatting with her, and it was actually her idea to make the film. I'm going to show you a short excerpt of the film. It was really fascinating because Sinead kind of led the film-making process, actually. Sinead took us out and wanted to show us things, and she was kind of very insistent on what we do. So I'll show you a short piece of Sinead's film.
One time I came up here, because I knew I had some seasoned firewood up here. I came in here and I found some tiny oak trees. Tiny oak trees that have been, there was more than 20 of them, they didn't all survive, but they, in a different area now, they had been planted by this bird, you see, I presume, the jay that does that, it plants acorns. And I was just stunned, I was amazed. It was like a sign. There were all these tiny oak trees, and this should be an oak forest. And I felt then I had to protect the oak trees. And some of them were under the spruce and weren't getting enough light. So I renewed cutting with increased vigour. I was up here every day all through the summer. I'd come up here at the last end of the day in the evening and work till it got dark. And you know, in the summer you can work till about 10 to 11. And I'd be up here cutting spruce. And so to let the light into these tiny oaks. And yeah, I mean, they're up against it, tiny trees like that. Everything was trying to eat them. And some of them were in unsuitable ground, too wet.
Okay, I'll turn the sound off on that and just continue talking. So we spent weeks hanging out with Sinead, and in the end, she was acquitted. She was given a stern warning by the judge. She was told never to use a chainsaw again. So instead, she bought an electric chainsaw, which isn't as loud. So an amazing woman. The Extinction Rebellion group got involved in her case after we made this film, and we helped them out a little bit with some promotion using material from the film. And there was kind of pressure on Cuilcha, and so they backed off, and she's still up there cutting down trees as far as we know. So that was that one. So that was supposed to have been shown at TULCA, but that didn't happen. Unfortunately, Sarah Brown's TULCA. So around, let's say, 2020, I started working with an artist from Kerry called Mika van Mechelen. We're still working together. Mika and I kind of talked a lot about this idea of long engagement, of kind of staying with something for a decent amount of time, about ethical filmmaking. We were also interested in this idea of ethnography and what it means to kind of, which led on from the long engagement idea. So we became interested in a style of filmmaking that came out of ethnographic filmmaking, which is a kind of practice that anthropologists often use, I suppose. We wanted to know what it would be like to not care about beautiful images all the time, but care more about what the audience feels when they're watching a film. if that makes sense. So we kind of very deliberately handhold cameras. We don't often use tripods in the work I do with Mika. And it's very kind of observational. We don't do voiceovers or anything like that. So it's just about how that kind of, the experience of us being with somebody or in a place can be transmitted to an audience using film without kind of being didactic or talking too much about it. So this film, I won't show a clip of that, is from this clip, or that still rather, is from a film called Like a Mouse, which is about this ecologist, Dr. Rory Hodd, who had discovered a tiny little fern in Killarney National Park that had been kind of blown over, the spores of which had been blown over from cloud forests in Jamaica, and it had found this little home in this tiny little corner of Killarney National Park against all the odds. So again, we spent a long time with Rory, talking with him first, and spent a lot of time in the national park. And the story, the film kind of became about the park and the kind of ecology of the park as well. So we spent about almost a year making this film, which is really just 15 minutes on and off, of course. That was kind of a tester for a bigger project. Mika and I made a film which premiered actually in 2023 at the Galway Film Fleadh, called Hungry Hill. So this is our first feature film together. So for that, we were exploring the kind of the farming community, I suppose, the sheep farming, hill farming community in Beara Peninsula in South Kerry and West Cork. And so we got to know these brothers, Connie and John, and we spent, again, over a year making this film, going out to them as much as possible. The film also became a little bit about Mika's own story, because she also is a sheep farmer in that part of the world. And we ended up using archive footage from Belgium. So in Belgium, in this part of Belgium near the Dole nuclear plant in the 1970s, the water and land there started to become seriously polluted, and there was also chemical activity going on there. So that was part of the reason that Mika's family moved from Belgium to South Kerry in the early 1980s. So we used that as a kind of a premise and thinking about what the ecology of this place might be like in 100 years, let's say. So we kind of decided to try juxtaposing this story of Mika's family with archive footage from Belgium and with contemporary footage from West Cork. I'm going to show about 4 or 5 minutes of this.
Dus het zou erg zonde zijn om dit geheel te verstoren door allerlei zware strepen door dat landschap.
Wij denken het wel. Door de nachtwacht trek je ook geen strepen, die knip je ook niet in tweeën. Dan is het ook geen nachtwacht meer.
Een van de mooiste plekjes van de omgeving is het landgoed Mattenburg. Het tracé van de TGV, de internationale supersneltrein, is er dwars doorheen getekend, vlak langs de voordeur van het statige landhuis. Er liggen meer waardevolle gebieden rond de Zeeuws-Brabantse polders. In het afgesloten oostelijk deel van de Oosterschelde is er bijvoorbeeld het Markizaat En aan de overkant van de Westerschelde liggen de uitgebreide schorren en slikken van het land van Saaftingen.
Men wil er naar streven allerlei natuurgebieden in Nederland aan elkaar te gaan koppelen. En het poldergebied, dat is heel belangrijk als overloop. Dieren die moeten kunnen trekken van het ene gebied naar het andere. En in verband met het in stand houden van populaties van dat soort gebieden moet er uitwisseling tussen die gebieden mogelijk zijn. En een enorm probleem gaat worden in deze regio de dreigende versnippering, waardoor al dat soort contacten tussen diergroepen en ook wel uitwisseling van, laten we zeggen, erfelijk materiaal tussen plantengezelschappen en zo, dat wordt steeds moeilijker gemaakt.
Voor wie er over de A58 voorbij rijdt, is dit een heel gewoon stukje polderland. Maar in het gebied zelf groeit het protest tegen alle grootse plannen die er zijn.
Het is een volledig verlaten gebied waar alleen maar wat recreatiefietsers doorheen komen. En verder is het een typisch agrarisch verlaten gebied.
Op de kaart is het dus een witte vlek en daar kunnen mooie dingen mee gedaan worden.
Ik denk dat het zo werkt. Dat er toch een andere opvatting over dit terrein bestaat bij sommige bestuurderen dan bij de polderbewoners zelf. Maar het hem is nader dan er ook.
Borsti!
Connie paid for it.
Borsti! Borsti hier! Hier! Ja, halt! Borsti doen! Borsti doen! Zo vast je ding. Zo hard. Halt!
Ik wil 15 cent.
Ik zal erbij geven.
Okay, so so that was kind of an experiment. We were putting different things together really to see how it worked, and we were quite happy to try that experiment, and pretty content with how it worked out. So really, it was about the place. It was about West Cork, and how it's changing, how the ecology is changing, how industry is affecting it, and so on. And we used these other narratives to kind of help tell that story. I'd like to mention the sound design for that film was done by a guy called Tony Langlois, who sadly just passed away a couple of weeks ago. He was also one of the founders of Indie Cork Film Festival. So that was Hungry Hill. So we're quite pleased with how that worked out. I'm going to show you just a short clip of this current project that Mika and I are working on, which we're calling Bird Rain for the moment. It's not a great title, we might change that. We've been following this family, Diarmuid Ling, he describes himself as a wild hurler, an Irish speaker. He's kind of, if you imagine Cuchulainn doing yoga, I think that's probably the easiest way to describe him. And his wife and family, so that's Siobhan de Puer, his partner, and they have 3 children. She's a poet. They're really big into kind of Irish culture revivalism, trying to think about how we could change Irish culture and bring certain kind of older elements of it back. I guess they're kind of making it up as they go along, and they fully acknowledge that. But they have a large kind of circle of people around them, and we spent all of this summer and most of the end of last year following them. and filming them. So I'm just going to show you this is just this has never been shown. It's just a short clip of a few bits of footage that we have thrown together. We have 30-something hours of footage that we're working through at the moment. Anyway.
He ran away. He ran away. His brother ran away. The wolf's brother ran away.
I shot 25.
Where did you get the gun?
Bam! Out of my finger escape.
Here for Jamie.
I mean, if someone asked me what kind of universe do I live in, I would say I live in a universe where a caterpillar becomes a butterfly, and that is astonishing. You know, there's a little creature with a long furry body, you know, and 8 legs, and he lives on leaves. And one day he climbs a tree and spins a cocoon for himself, you know. And later, you know, a couple of months later, or the next season, he emerges as a butterfly, you know, totally changed and so totally transformed. Now, just as that can happen to a butterfly, that can happen to the whole universe. Maybe one day the whole universe that is supposed to have begun in a big bang will end in a big crunch. Maybe one day that whole universe will spin a cocoon for itself and will emerge something totally different. The universe is full of surprises, and if we live in a universe where there's no surprise, we're dead. You know, we're dead.
So this archive footage then is from RTE of this philosopher John Moriarty, who's a big influence on the lifestyle of Diarmaid, Siobhan, and all of the people in their circle. So this is we're kind of juxtaposing some of this archive material we have. Also, we have other different kind of types of archive material that we're using to kind of tell the story of this really unusual group of people who feel like that they're on a mission to change Ireland, you know. So, and I mean, it's to be, you know, it's to be answered, I suppose, if that's going to have any effect or not. But it feels like there's a kind of a movement happening around these people, and we were quite interested. So we spent a long time. We just finished filming a couple of weeks ago, actually. So that's the current project. I'm going to move on now and talk about some of the work I've done with Askeaton Arts. That child, by the way, is Eru, who's just the most charming little girl in the world. She's fantastic. Who didn't really care about what we were filming. She just did what she wanted to do. I'll first talk about this book project that I did with Askeaton Arts before really I started making films with them. We worked with Eddie Lenihan, the folklorist, on kind of identifying places in County Clare that had rink forts or kind of places where fairies were involved with that had been altered or affected by road construction or farming and things like that. So again, in this spirit of long engagement, of kind of really being somewhere for a long time, I hung out with Eddie for most of a summer. We'd go off on drives in my car around Clare, and he would show me places that were kind of interesting to him and that had been kind of affected. So the most famous one is this place here on the what's the motorway in Galway? So the M15, sorry, Limerick to Galway. M18, thanks. Yeah, so it's just near Ennis, actually. And so the bush here that's circled was slated to be demolished for the road construction in the early 2000s, and Eddie stopped the whole process. He got the press involved, and quite famously, the New York Times and the Washington Post picked it up. And so you can kind of see from this photo, the road kind of now kinks around this bush, which is a meeting place for the ferries of Munster and Munster and Connacht. So Eddie had this amazing kind of power to get people to do that, so he changed the trajectory of that motorway. So that was one of the cases that we looked at for the book. The other one is on the cover. It's Curtain Fort, which is close to Gort, actually, in County Galway. And we kind of looked at how that had changed over the years and how the road had kind of slowly developed and become closer and closer to the point now, as you can see in that picture up on the top left, the fort is cut right in half. And Eddie would say that it would cause problems. The ferries would cause problems for people because of that. And we discovered through Freedom of Information requests that that section of the motorway has more accidents than any other section of motorway in Ireland, for example. So it was kind of really fun project to work on with Eddie. And actually it was discussed in the Dáil when there was a new bill being put in into action a couple of years ago. And Sinead Mercier, who wrote the opening essay, is currently working on a PhD on this topic as well at Trinity. Let's see, next. So one of the first projects I worked on with Michele and Sean in Askeaton was this interview that Joe Melvin did with the curator and activist Lucy Lippard. So this is during lockdown. So Michele and I kind of had discussed doing something for a long time, but when lockdown came along, we said, like, let's try making some kind of desktop documentary or something like that. So we made 2 or 3 during that time. So desktop documentary, if you haven't heard this term, basically is a documentary where the filmmaker doesn't leave the computer. It's all made using that frame of the computer and the internet and that kind of interface that we're so familiar with. So that was a really nice conversation, and we illustrated it in certain ways between Joe, who's also a curator, and Lucy Lippard. It was mainly about this exhibition that she had done in the 1980s in Dublin. I'm going to show you a short clip of this one. It's another kind of desktop documentary we did at that time. So remember, like, these are just we were just kind of playing around, looking for something kind of to keep us occupied, I suppose, during that time. So we did this really nice film about this artist, Burnout Smild, who had done a residency in Askeaton some years before as part of their residency program that they do every summer. And what Burnout had done is he had gone online and he had looked for another Askeaton anywhere in the world. And there's only one, and it's somewhere deep in Ohio or somewhere in the United States. So he went on Google Street View like this, and he took a screenshot, and then that barn, he blew the image from the screenshot up to life size, and he put it on the side of the road in Askeaton, County Limerick. So I'm going to just play you that short clip. Just here he is.
It started with I got to learn Michele during a residency at IMA in 2008. And also Sean, and Michele invited me a year later for Askeaton Contemporary Arts if I was interested in a residency. And so I was looking just for information on what Askeaton would look like, and through Google I got directed through an Askeaton, and the only images I could see was an Askeaton, but that one was in Wisconsin, in the US. So Google hadn't been to Limerick before, and there was no information other than a few other photographs, so I couldn't really link it. But I found it really interesting that I got directed to a kind of a double Askeaton, almost like a copy. And so that was kind of interesting. And so what I did was actually, well, then I found out about the other Askeaton, that lots of people, due to the potato famine in the 1840s, moved from Askeaton to the US and set up a new town also called Askeaton. But the first image that showed up online was this particular, well, American barn, just at the beginning of Askeaton in the US. And so I copied this particular barn and, well, made a prop out of it and placed it on the most resembling location in the original town of Askeaton. So yeah, it was actually, it was a billboard. It was, well, it was just 8 meters wide, I think, but 3 meters high. But yeah, the idea was that if Google would come by to document Limerick and the surroundings, that this image would be picked up and be photographed, and that the same building would exist in both Askeatons at the same time. But it was just an idea, and so we made this billboard. It was during the residency. It was up for about 3 weeks, and that image I used at the time was also just a screenshot at 72 dpi. But it has this enormous blocks like this, you know, from a distance. If you printed it in 3 by 8 meters, so from a distance it looks like a barn, but coming up close it would just fall apart. In the 3 weeks time, I spent most of the time constructing that thing actually, and getting the materials. I used the town hall for that in Askeaton to build it, and then in sections, and then we had to put it up on location. Yeah, well, I think I was the first one done with the with the work actually, you know, from the other residents. So there was some time left.
Okay, so that's what's even more interesting is that the Google Street View car came along and photographed it, and it ended up on Street View afterwards, which was like a really nice cherry on the icing there. So, I mean, the idea was that we kind of looked through artists that had worked with Askeaton, make films about them. So we kind of kept doing that, and it's really kind of gone on from there. So this film we made with Shawnee Barron in 2018 became part of the TULCA festival this year. So you may have seen Shawnee's sticks in the Printworks gallery here as part of the show, and this film is on in the adjoining room. So for this, we decided to kind of take a very, to go back to my roots as a filmmaker and take a very kind of ethnographic style approach. So we just kind of hung out with Shawnee and his camera for a few days, and his sticks rather, for a few days, me with my camera. And what we ended up with was a really exquisite, I think, a really nice film, because Shawnee is just such a character. I'm not going to show a clip of that. I'd recommend you go look at it in the Printworks if you haven't seen it. Shawnee is an amazing guy. He made the film, and we won a couple of awards with this film, and it got shown in several film festivals and other places around. So we're really happy with it. So that was kind of, so Shawnee has been one of the longest, the artist that's been working with Askeaton the longest. He's from Askeaton, and so they've really taken him, and he's become a central part of the whole operation there. We recently were in Helsinki, and we showed this at a gallery in Helsinki, and Shawnee did a really great talk there as well. So that was Shawnee Barron only in Askeaton. We did a film with Adrian Duncan, who's a writer and artist as well. So Adrian was doing this really nice project, a book project about Bungalow Bliss, which was a book written in the early 70s originally, which is kind of a manual on how to build a bungalow. So most of the bungalows that you'll see around the countryside, if you don't know this already, in Ireland, will have come out of this kind of list of Bungalow Bliss designs that this guy made. And Adrian was very interested in this, and he started researching it. He did a residency also in Askeaton. This particular shot is taken from Askeaton Town Hall when he was working on that project. And so I'm going to show a short piece of that film, which was really nice as well.
So, yeah, these are the original drawings that would have been produced in Kells Art Studio, which you can see right in there, Kells Art Studio, Kells, County Meath, with 3-digit telephone numbers. The way Fitzsimons did it, and I didn't realise this until I came into the archive, exactly how he went about it. I always thought it was large A1 drawings, but they're actually sort of, they're not really any size. They're not A2, they're not A3. They're a weird kind of in-between size. So the 3 sets of drawings are this. You've got the elevation here. So this is what it looks like from the road. And then this is what it looks like from the elevation from this side here. This is the plan. This is essentially the layout of the bungalow. So your dining room, living room, kitchenette, bathroom, and 3 bedrooms. And then there's a little boiler in here. So you have your central hearth here for the fire, and you have your boiler here taking heat off it. And this then would have sent hot water not only into places like the bathroom, but also around the radiators around the house like that there. So when you would have bought the book off in say a DIY store or a newsagent's or a petrol station or whatever, and then you'd ring Jack and you'd say, can I get design number 1? I need 6 copies to go in for planning. And he'd send you out 6 copies of this, this and this. And then they'd all go into planning with your site map and your all of the other pieces of information that you needed for the planning pack at that time. That's essentially how it happened. Then you received planning and then you built based on these details, these dimensions, these construction details, and where these windows were, and this general overall aesthetic. This is what you followed. And then that's how the house appeared on the landscape.
When we were very young, my brother and I used to stand in front of the window of our sitting room and peer out at the world. Our house, I should say, is pure Bungalow Bliss, straight from the book, design number 108, the Hazels, except for one tiny difference. The builders got the split levels, floor joists, all wrong. My father, a builder and salt merchant, once came close to complete ruin. After many visits from a young bank manager whose manner was kind, my father was forced to sell his warehouses by the sea, his residential properties, all of his trucks, vans and lorries, and most of his salt stock. What was left of the stock was deposited one morning outside of our house and covered over with a white sheet of plastic. My father spent 4 months in bed. The autumn day he chose to re-enter the world was so clear that I was sure he would cry when he saw it. But he simply sat at the kitchen table and drank a cup of steaming coffee in a strange, deliberate manner. Eventually he called the family to the table and said, "That, out there, under that tarpaulin, is all I have left." We turned and looked at the white, quaking mound. "Underneath that sheet of plastic is 3 tons of salt," he said, and, he said, "we must get it indoors before the winter comes." The 3 tons of salt were stacked on the upper part of our split-level home where the builders had built the joists incorrectly, and some creaking weeks later, the whole ziggurat of salt and timber and nail and dust came clattering down, crushing my dear brother, my mother, and me. As for my father, I have no way of telling what he did next or where he went.
So yeah, that was a kind of a nice film to work on with Adrian. So like as these kind of projects went on, we got more and more kind of ambitious and elaborate with them. And so that, I suppose the main thing is I was given absolute creative freedom by Askeaton Arts. So they would give me a project, do a film about Adrian Duncan, and I would go away for a few weeks and think about it. And so that's where I kind of started coming up with methodologies and ways to approach the individual subject. And my kind of challenge to myself was that every time I did it, it would have to be different. So every film that we did with Askeaton Contemporary Arts was different, and that's kind of how it continues. I try to use a different style, different methodology each time, and that kind of went on and on from there. Last one of those that I'll talk about is the Lily of the Valley, which is also here. Actually, I have 2 more briefly to talk about, and then we'll finish up. Lily of the Valley, which is shown at the Galway Arts Centre here. So this was a really fun one, really interesting one to work on. If you don't know, it's about Lily Van Oost, who was a Belgian as well, Belgian artist who lived in the Black Valley in County Kerry very kind of enigmatic and eccentric woman in certain ways. So we went looking for any archive material, any of her artworks that we could find, and we dug up an awful lot. And that actually, the film kind of started the process of thinking about what else could happen with Lily's work. The exhibition kind of came out of that, and we're planning more things again as well. So I'll just show a short piece of that film, not long. You can see it down at the Art Centre if you need to. But again, we kind of changed the method on this. This was really more about using archive material in unusual ways. Just a note also, we worked with Mika van Mechelen on this film, who I work with in my other work as well. Mika and her family were close friends of Lily van Oost growing up. So Mika helped write the voiceover for the film, and also she narrated it.
From her little house in the Black Valley, Lily seemed to be constantly working on new strategies to use materials she had to hand to poke at Irish society and the political realities of the time. These images of Lily's work for an extensive exhibition with the Women's Artists Action Group, or WAG, show how Lily used textiles and all sorts of materials to talk about the taboo in 1980s Irish society. Is that a fetus? Is that menstrual blood? Undignified death? Horror? That was Lily, using wool and tights nylon to say things that didn't want to be heard at that time. When Lily was granted Irish citizenship in 1986, she presented a heavy woven wool piece named Brian Boru's Coat to the National Museum of Ireland. The body of the coat was woven in unprocessed wool. And the imperfections, including some marking fluid that farmers use to identify their sheep, are part of the overall artwork. When we finished filming the coat, it was put back in the box and returned to the archive.
So I suppose like the moral of this film was really about cultural heritage and how it's treated. So Lily van Oost was kind of a well-known artist. She had exhibitions, she was shown in places, but also she was kind of forgotten about in the kind of larger picture, the larger kind of cultural heritage picture. And so we found pieces of her work this is in Tralee in the library. We found her work in the National Museum. We found her work in a garage in Killarney, that piece is on display in the Galway Arts Centre. So we were finding bits of her everywhere. And that was kind of how we tried to approach the way of making the film as well. We wanted to show that this amazing artist, kind of when you start to scratch at the surface, there's bits of her everywhere. And maybe we should think about doing something with that, or how do we kind of treat her own legacy as an artist. And that was very much kind of how we led up the idea behind making the film. So it was a very interesting process. As part of it, we met Grace Wells, who ended up more or less curating the exhibition, well, selecting some of the work. This is Grace here. That ended up in the Galway Arts Centre for this festival. So Grace actually lived with Lily for a number of years, and she moved in with her to write her autobiography, which was supposed to be called the Liliad, which is amazing. But it was never written, and they had a big falling out. And anyway, they made it up after years. Just an interesting thing about the film, actually, which you can never really predict these things. When Niamh Moriarty, who's working with Askeaton at the time, contacted the museum to take this coat out of storage so that we could film it, they took it out and they noticed that there was like little moths actually kind of eating away at parts of it. And so we had to wait a few months because it triggered a museum-wide audit of all the textiles. So we kind of started a ball rolling that we didn't expect to. So we had to go back a few months later to film this. I've just got one more Askeaton film to talk about with you. That's a film that I made last year with Ruth Clinton and Niamh Moriarty about the abbey in the Franciscan Abbey in Askeaton. So Ruth and Niamh also have an element in the TULCA Arts Festival this year. So when Michele and Sean approached me to make a film about the kind of the unusual, the strange kind of history and the strange artworks embedded in this friary in Askeaton, I approached Ruth and Niamh because they'd done a lot of work around it as well over the years. And we came up with an idea. So basically they became artworks in the Abbey, and they embodied them, and they wrote the narrative of the film from that point of view. So I'm just going to play you a short piece of this, which is called, this film is called Pass Me For I Am Strange.
One of my brothers, as punishment for some wrongdoing, came looking for Girt na Sudra. The field of the cajoler, the spongy sod, the tanner's crop. On a mission to establish a monastery, by chance he found it here, and in one night, it is said, the abbey was built. I sit in a special little seat crowned with oak. For a very long time, I've watched the walls, seen brothers come and go according to who sits in the big house over the way. They haven't come back here since the last time they left, but I'm not alone. Catherine, a little shattered, is just around the corner with her wheel and sword. Patrick sits up in his lofty house, lording it over us both. Very pleased with himself, I'm sure, because his features are sharp, unlike mine, transformed by hundreds of years of love. I'm St. Francis. I'm a limb of St. Francis, a remote or distant memory of him. I'm St. Francis's earthly representative in Limerick. Our flesh was stigmatized, made to resemble that of Christ, proof of Christ's divine love for us. My blank, unseeing countenance is proof of the love of the people of Askeaton for me. With each stolen midnight kiss, I'm vanishing, one infinitesimal layer of stony skin at a time. 7 times around the cloister, 7 kisses, your toothache and my face, effaced. Pass me, for I am strange.
So yeah, so I guess like our approach for the film was totally wide open again, and we had lots of fun doing it. I guess that's all I really have. I suppose like what I'd like to kind of cap this off by saying is that it's a privilege to be able to work on this type of film. So I'm given completely free rein, and this one was kind of one of the more unusual ones we did, I think, and that was led a lot by the collaboration with Niamh and Ruth on that one. So when a subject is proposed to me by Michele or Sean or both, it's my job then to kind of think about what's the kind of most unusual, maybe the most unforgiving sometimes way of approaching that particular subject. In this one, I was kind of thinking about Nationwide. You know that program Nationwide on RTÉ that do this, you know, so they'll turn up at a place like this and interview the tour guide. And so we kind of use that aesthetic as part of it as well. We wanted to keep that in it while making it something strange also. So that's all I have. Yeah, so thank you very much.